Hi, and welcome to another Fiber Friday here on Dark Serenity. I'm Tika. Thank you for joining me again. If this is your first time, feel free to go back and watch some of my prior content. Don't forget to hydrate. Sorry, my mouth has been really dry, so I'm going to hopefully not be too dehydrated in this episode. Anyway, what we're going to be going over today is going to be the single crochet magic ring, or as it's sometimes referred to, magic circle or magic loop, the slip stitch. I'm going to try to include a bit of other stitches and terminology that's useful for getting started. And so long as these don't take super long, we'll also go into some of the other crochet stitches so that way you can start working on a project. Or we can start that process together. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a bit of an update here before I move on into the video. If you see the outfit change rapidly, it's because some of this was recorded when I recorded last week's episode. It just got a little bit too long to record that video, and so I am splitting some of that up, but I like how I explained some things in there, and so I'm keeping it. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so with a single crochet, when you see it in a written pattern, depending on if it's the American terminology or the UK terminology, it will be written one of two ways. Why we can't be consistent, I don't know. For the majority of my videos and patterns, I will be using single crochet terminology and patterns that use Americanized terminology. However, there will be occasional times where there'll be a pattern I want to use, and I may say double crochet as the pattern may say double crochet. It is important to know the difference in which pattern writing type, like whether it's UK or American, as that will drastically affect the outcome of the project. Now, as I said, in American terms, it is written single crochet or SC. I don't know why I'm pointing like I'm going to be able to put my fingers on top of that. Let's use the mouse, but here, SC. And then in the UK terms, it's going to be a double crochet. This gets confusing when American terms get to double crochet, but that's the difference. Now, there are going to be patterns that are not using words. They are going to use the symbols instead. And as I've gone over with the chain symbol, we're going to continue that in this one with the single crochet symbology. Now, it's either going to be an X as seen above or the plus sign. I don't know if they were supposed to be one as American terminology, one is UK symbology, not terminology. But if it was supposed to be that way, something got lost in translation, because as far as I know, they're used interchangeably, just depending on the software used to write the pattern, if it's being written on a computer or handwriting preference from the individual creating it. But you may see the single crochet seen as an X or a plus. Okay, so starting out here, we have our chain stitch. This is just a stitch of 10. And then we're going to go ahead and start making a row of single crochet. Now, in order to do this, I am going to have to put in an 11th stitch. The reason being is we need a chain in order to turn it upright and continue going back the other direction. Okay, interrupting here because I didn't cover this well enough in my opinion, but with the turning chain, you're going to need the one chain stitch for each stitch of height that you're adding. So with a single crochet, you need to add the one additional chain. If you're doing a half double crochet, you're going to need two turning chains extra. When you get to the double crochet, it'll be 3, the treble crochet will be 4, and so on. For again, every stitch height that you're adding, you will be adding an additional chain stitch to account for that height when making a turning chain. Now, when I mean turning, we are going to take this stitch and it's going to go upright like that, but we still want that same space in the chain distance. I'm going to go ahead and pull this to my hands now, as the next little bit here will be easier to see from the perspective of my hands. Okay, so now that we're down here and you can see a little bit more of what I'm doing, I have all 11 stitches. Patterns are going to be written with the phrase typically of, for our example with single crochet in the second stitch from the hook. What that's going to mean is that right here, where our hook is sitting, we have this first stitch, which is going to be stitch number 11 on this chain, and it's the one that the yarn is actively coming out of. The stitch next to it, which would have been our number 10 stitch, had we not made that additional stitch, will be our second chain from the hook. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go underneath, not just the one loop, but the second loop. So that way I have those 2 stitches there. Plus, if I tighten this up just a little bit, I will have my third stitch there, which will be where the working yarn is coming off of. Now, as I went over last week, we are going to do yarn over or yarn under. So if I'm yarning over for me, it's going to look like a yarn under from you. I realize that from my perspective, the camera is in the opposite direction. I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to do this yarn over or yarn under again and pull that through both of those loops. So again, I'm going underneath 2 stitches. Those 2 are there. The back bump is on the other side. Yarn over or yarn under and pull through both of those, leaving the working yarn plus the other stitch that we just cast on, and then pulling through again with another stitch. So we're just gonna two new loops, the working yarn, over or under, pull through, yarn over, yarn under, pull through. And again, we're just going to keep repeating that down the line. Now, if you've practiced and made a rather long chain, you don't have to completely frog the chain. You can begin to practice your single crochet stitches by just going down the line. Now, I will say a good example of how to start out with your first chain and transitioning into single crochet stitches or any other stitch, especially if you are new, you're going to want to come in and maybe make your basic crochet chain with a larger hook and then drop down to the hook size that you wish to work in. The reason for this is that you are naturally going to be a little bit tighter or have issues with tension when you first begin. If you go with a slightly larger hook when you're first beginning, the hook that you are actually attempting to use can typically go through that chain a little bit easier than if you pulled it really tight on this hook. You might not be able to get this one back through. However, continuing on, we have just finished this entire row. Now at the very bottom here, where our bottom stitch is, sorry about my dog groaning and grumbling over there. But no, on the bottom of the first row that we made, there is going to be the bottom bump, which was previously the back bump. Now, this is why I prefer the foundation chain is I actually get a V shape on the bottom, which looks a little bit cleaner and neater than just the individual remaining loop on the edges here. But this is the standard starting place for most people. On the opposite end, we have a very nice V shape. My camera will focus. Where if I turn this a little bit upright, they are just stacked V's, almost similar to that of knitted look when they're standing upright. The anatomy of the single crochet, let me pull this that way I have a working loop. In here, not only do I have the front loop and back loop, I have the chain, or the space between. So underneath here is where my stitches are going to go unless I am doing a front loop or back loop only project. They're interrupting here again for just a moment. As I mentioned in there, and I figured I should probably also include some of the written symbology that you will see for this front loop only and back loop only. So as I was going over in that last clip where some patterns will say that you'll be working in the front loop or in the back loop, oftentimes they'll be saying only for the most part. Sometimes they'll say for just a single stitch, in which case what you'll get is instead of the FLO or BLO, you might get just that. But the front loop only and back loop only are common in finishing parts of projects or in specific rows. I've seen it a lot in amigurumi and in ribbing. Now, I'm not very good at drawing. However, I am going to attempt this. In the front loop only, the symbology is often seen as like a U shape, like as in just the front half of the chain stitch, whereas in the back loop, it's the direct opposite. So basically, if I were to crochet the chain stitch or write out the crochet stitch, and then if I was trying to draw them, if I draw an imaginary line right through them, this one denotes the back loop only, and this one would denote the front loop only. I hope that makes some sense. And again, sorry about the terrible drawing. I don't often see this in the patterns with just symbols. However, I also haven't watched, or not watched, but used a lot of those. But since I did forget to include this in the last clip, I figured I'd include it here. There's another stitch in here which has you go around the post. I'm not going to show you that stitch right now, but I am going to show you where the post is at. So right here we have the loops of one stitch, and right next to it we have the loops of the other. I go in between both of those two stitches. There's going to be this center post that's upright. That is going to be where the post is at when crocheting. We aren't going to work with that for right now. We are just going to be working with the single crochet. And as I said, we have made it all the way to the end of our first row. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain one. So I bring added height, and then I'm going to turn my work. Now, as I've turned, I can continue crocheting. It is very important that when you are doing the various stitches that you will be working with, that if you choose not to do a chain to turn, that you do that consistently on each side, and you go into that same spot that you started your yarn coming out of on the stitch below. Otherwise, it will just taper in. If you are not consistent and on one you do a turning chain and on the other you just continue to turn around and just try to work backwards, you will get a wavy type line when crocheting. If you want neater, straighter edges, you want to make sure that if you're chaining one here, you're chaining one on this end. And if you're putting it into this first stitch here, you're putting it into the same stitch on the opposite side and not moving it in one or the other arbitrarily. Otherwise, your pattern is going to come out with weird edges. But what we are going to do is going to pull up here and go ahead and I'm going to go under those two, pull up my first loop, yarn over, chain through there. Stick it through, yarn over, pull through, and then I'm going to go ahead and just continue it down this line. So we chained our one, turned around, and I'm just going to go back across. So I have a total of 3 single crochet rows. Okay, and then I am going to fasten off by clipping that. And then I'm going to make like I'm about to do another chain stitch. So I'm going to go over, I'm going to pull it through, but instead of, yarning over and chaining or turning, I'm just going to pull it all the way through and pull up on that to secure that end so that this chain and crochet spot is completely done. So the rest of that clip was really bad and I had my hands off screen for most of it. But what I was going over was that this is the 10 stitches with 3 rows that I did. I used a slightly larger hook because as per last week's video, I have misplaced my 5mm hook and my 5.5. So I'd gone up to the 6mm hook, which for most patterns is not a problem depending on the pattern. With this particular one, the holes in it, like you get a bit of gapping to where I can kind of stick my pinky through, but not all the way through. So depending on what I'm working with, going up that hook size is not going to make a drastic difference. I did also crochet myself a piece that was 2 hook sizes smaller, where my fingers do not go through it at all. So if you're working for something like a baby blanket, you may actually want to size down to a smaller hook than what the yarn recommends, just so their fingers don't get, caught and trapped into the blanket. If you don't like the feeling of your fingers going through the yarn on any blankets, so you don't want, fingers to go through, or your toes or whatever for blanket type work, you are definitely going to want to size down a hook from what the yarn recommends or work on getting your tension tighter. If you're very beginning new, I probably wouldn't do tighter tension, but I would do a smaller hook size, as when you're first starting out, your tension already naturally tends to be really tight. In addition, I did also do 3 rows on a size 10mm hook, which is several sizes larger than the yarn recommends, as the yarn did recommend the 5mm hook. So I went nearly 5mm larger, or not nearly, I did go 5mm larger than it was recommending. It leaves for a much larger piece where there are easily enough I could fit all of my fingers through and not have it negatively affect that stitch definition. Here is the 6mm crochet hook versus the 10mm. It's significantly larger and uses same stitch, everything. If I'm making something that needs to have drape or loose fitting, like I want a shawl or I want a jacket or something that's not super heavy, then I'm probably going to want to size up a couple of stitches, as long as I don't mind that there are going to be the holes and gaps in it. That can also make certain yarns more difficult to work with or less difficult depending on the yarn type. Okay, one of the preferred methods I have to start with is the magic ring, which is what we're going to get started on next. Now in there, you can see this octopi has a ring here at the top that just spirals out. This one here, which is made from the same yarn that we're working with right now, starts with a center spot. It does grow. We're able to go around and make the circle for the body. And then using that same single crochet method that I used for the body here that I was just talking about in the previous clip, I was able to use the chains for our basic chain stitch that we learned in the last video. Chain up the legs and then single crochet back down them following the pattern. Use a slip stitch to go right in here and connect those two, and we will be going over the slip stitch here shortly. But after slip stitching, you chain again follow the pattern all the way back down, and it eventually creates one of these little guys. This pattern here also uses a slip stitch, which is a term we will need to know for this next section, along with magic ring. Magic ring can also be written as magic circle, magic loop, and a few others. This image here is a very badly drawn version of what I have seen on crochet charts that are done in the symbols, and it is just a spiral. This indicates that you're typically going to start with a magic ring as opposed to the chain method. Now, you can typically see some of these, my octopi that I showed off in the previous little bit of this video, can technically be done using either of these. So if you struggle with the magic ring, it's not the worst thing in the world. There are still a lot of projects you can do that don't require it, or if they do require it, you can use the chain method instead. Just know that with the chaining method, you only have so much ability to tighten the center before there's a small hole, versus doing it with the magic loop where you can close that hole up no matter how tight it is. Assuming you haven't put a million stitches in your magic loop. Okay, so we've done the slip knot, we've done the chain stitch. How do we do a magic ring? Now there are many methods I have seen people doing, from a weird one where you wrap your stuff around the finger and get it to work that way. I've seen it done a few different ways. The way I am most familiar with is that I take my tail end and I grab it between my ring finger and my middle finger, and while holding it, I wrap, because holding it with my thumb, I'm going to wrap that yarn around my two fingers. I'm going to take that same loop and I'm going to go up closer to my knuckles, and I'm going to hold it. I can use my pinky to hold it for now. And then I'm going to take my crochet hook, go under that very first loop, grab the upper loop, pull it through and twist, and then I am going to go back under my working yarn again and pull that through. Now what I have done, if I remove my 2 fingers there, is I have created 2 slip knots. One here with my working yarn where I'm going to be making my single crochets, and the other where if I pull on the tail end, it tightens up the magic ring. Now that is the method I am most familiar with, and it's been fairly easy to work with. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 1 to add my stitch height on this one, and then very similar to how we did the double crochet or single crochet, very similar to how we did the single crochet in our chain stitches, I'm going to go underneath the loop created by the tail and the tail end. If you only do the one and leave the tail end out, you will not be able to properly tighten it or secure it. If you go under both, it will not only tighten correctly, but it'll also be able to be secured correctly. So I will have my working yarns loop here, the loop for the magic ring and the tail for the magic ring, yarn over or yarn under, loop over again or under again, and then pull through just the same as your normal single crochet. Now, depending on if you're planning to work in a row or a round, which the biggest difference is do you use the slip stitch at the end or do you just continue chaining around? Regardless, I very much recommend, if you are a very beginner and likely to lose your place, take a stitch marker and mark that very first stitch so you know where your starting stitch is at. So you don't accidentally try to crochet into that chain. Now we go back over here and we are just going to put in a few more single crochets. So again, I go under both the loop and the tail, and I grab my working yarn in either yarn over or yarn under, loop it again, and pull it through both of those. Just continuing to add our single crochets to our magic ring. Magic rings typically have anywhere from 3 to as many loops as you want, with the knowledge that if you have too many, you will not be able to get the hole that it should have there at the center to perfectly close. Now that can be the desire of certain patterns. It could also be a flaw if you are just trying to add more loops there so you don't have to have it grow quite as much as you're working. There are other methods that can be used. But let's see, how many do I have on here? Now when I'm counting my stitches here, I could count this way, but I can also just flip it upright and count my V stitches here. So I've got my first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we are going to put in 8 stitches. I am going to tighten this up a little bit. To tighten it up as you're working with it, or even when you're ready to fully tighten it, you're going to pinch that spot very lightly and pull on the yarn until it closes up. Now I'm not going to fully close it yet because I still want to put that 8th stitch in, but here I'm going to show you 2 different things that are important to know. First being, if you are planning to do a slip stitch closure to go up to the next row, you will just simply continue to work your normal stitch. Again, lightly hold that, and you will tighten it as tight as you possibly can get it or want it to be. Now, I don't know if you saw, but this spot here tightened down. That's why it was very important that I marked my starting chain, because I was able to pull that tighter. You cannot see where the entrance spot is. And I now have two options for how to continue into the next row. Depending on the pattern you're using, some will want you to work in rounds and some will want you to work in rows. If you are working in a round, you're going to remove your stitch marker, go under both of those loops for the V, yarn over or yarn under, pull up, make your first mark, and then replace your stitch marker because that is now stitch number 1, and you'll just continue working around, inputting or removing as many stitches as are required for the pattern. The other way to close the magic ring and move on would be that instead of single crocheting into this spot right here, we are going to slip stitch. To slip stitch, I am going to slide under both of those as though I was going to single crochet. I'm going to yarn over or yarn under, pull it through not just the one, but through the other loop on my hook. And now I have closed that. And if I were to be doing this in rows, I can chain 1 and then proceed to place my single crochets in the round all the way around. If you're trying to make a circle, you are going to want to increase the stitches. So I'm just going to go around so that way I can show you this in the next little segment. Later on, when we go over increases and decreases in the patterns, I'm going to show you how those are written and how they look and some of the methods of increase and decrease to get this particular spot to have a specific type of shape. And one moment. Okay, so all I did here was I extended this to a larger size by just increasing all the way around. And again, I'm back here at the beginning, so I can choose to go around in a circle. And if I were to do that, again, I would just continue to single crochet. If I'm going to be ending here, I would wrap my yarn around as though I was single crocheting, pull it through there. I'll have the working yarn loop and that loop I just created, and I'll pull through that one again so I only have the one loop on here. If I was to fasten off, it's going to be the same thing that I have previously done on the chains, which is I'm going to bring in here, clip the yarn, and now that I have made this, I'm not going to pull through like I did on the other one until I've yarned over and pulled through again. Otherwise, it's just going to allow that to come undone. Now I have this, and I can use this end to weave in and have my little... So now I briefly discussed the slip stitch in that last clip on the magic rings. As you can see above me, the abbreviation for it is either going to be SLST for slip stitch or written as SS. Now in the patterns, I have seen it either as a filled in oval or a simple dot that is fully filled in. If I am not mistaken, the SS is the UK commonality. However, in more recent years, it has been more common that I've seen in a lot of other patterns to use just the SS. But those are the two most common names and acronyms I have seen for the slip stitch. The slip stitch does have other value aside from joining something in the round. The other benefits to it, as I showed with the octopi and his little leg, there's a spot right in between here where I did a slip stitch because I wanted to be able to move one stitch over to be able to create his next tentacle without adding any stitch height right here. So I slip stitched, moved over, worked the next part of the project, and then continued that way. It can be used to attach and tack different parts of projects together, depending on the project you're working on. It can also be used to move stitches from point A to point B. Slip stitch is used to, again, go across from point A to point B without adding any height. It can also be used in crochet ribbing. Okay, so this is already a little bit longer than I wanted it to go. It's not at the quality I wanted this video to be, but I am not feeling the greatest. I think a week of, working 30 hours of overtime has kind of wiped me out energy-wise, and I'm starting to get a migraine, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up here. What we did cover was the single crochet, the magic ring, and the slip stitch. I did cover a few other definitions such as front loop only, back loop only, and how to find where the crochet post is at. What we're going to do here is end this. Next crochet video that I'm going to work on, I am going to try to work on doing the half double crochet, the double crochet, and the treble crochet. It should be significantly easier and shorter, as those are all just a variation on the single crochet, which we have already learned. For those of you that are just beginning, I highly recommend going through and just practicing the chain or foundation chain method and adding some single crochets and getting used to doing the methods there. For those of you that are wanting to do the magic ring, because you're wanting to get into amigurumi, or you're planning to do a whole mess of granny squares or something, definitely just start practicing with tying the loop. And even though it's probably not where you'd want to start, I would definitely start with the chain stitch to get used to making a single crochet, so you have at least the foundation to doing the magic ring. And then once you've learned that, and in conjunction with how to start the magic ring, you can put a lot of stitches in there until we go over increases or decreases, continuing in the round in that. If you're going to do that, I would definitely recommend putting at least 10 or 15 stitches in your magic loop so it doesn't pucker funny. But go ahead and practice and have a wonderful week or weekend. I'm going to go ahead and head off here. My dog is going to want my attention to go to the dog park so he can see his friends. Yep, he wishes to go to the dog park and demand attention. So we're going to go ahead and go do that, and you guys have a wonderful afternoon.